So welcome everyone to our curated author panel, all about our lifestyle authors. We have three wonderful people here on the call today. We have Pedro Mendes, author of 10 Garments Every Man Should Own. We have Karen Cleveland, who is one half of the new wedding book. And we also have Jennifer Turliuk, the author of How to Figure Out What to Do with Your Life Next. I will get each of these authors to go around and introduce themselves and introduce their books to you first. So let's start with Pedro.
Thank you, Christina. I'm Pedro Mendes. I'm a menswear writer and journalist. I've been working in the space for just over 10 years. And I've always tried to be the person in other guys' lives who can offer them advice, offer them guidance, offer them help. Because it's very difficult right now, I find, for either young men starting their wardrobe or older guys who want to improve to figure out what to buy, where to buy it, so on and so forth. The thing is, though, I didn't write this book to sell more clothes. I think that's the problem out there, is that the world is just overwhelmed with clothing. So I made this book to get people to start thinking about clothes like they think about food. So asking questions, who made this? What is it made out of? Under what kind of conditions? And to make people more aware of sustainability in clothes, which is growing as a trend right now. I am seeing more stories about it. I'm hearing more stories about it. But I feel that what's missing is a how-to. In my book, I talk about buy less, but buy better. But of course, what does that actually mean? And I try to offer strategies for how to do that. And then I go into each garment specifically, whether it's sweaters or trousers or shoes, and give examples of what to look for, not in terms of brands. This isn't about listing stores and companies. This is about figuring out, when you pick up an item, can you identify quality? What kind of work do you need to do to identify quality? And my hope in the end is for people to not to dress like me, not to look like me. This isn't a fashion book. It's about people building a better relationship with their clothes, a relationship that lasts a lifetime. The clothes that brings them more joy. And a big part of that, which is also a big part of the book, is how to take care of your clothes. So many people feel that this is a onerous chore. I celebrate it. I celebrate the joy of ironing, and if you do it right, and caring for your shoes and caring for your sweaters and all these sorts of things, to counteract the dopamine hit of getting something new with that joy of having something that's been with you for years, that's built a story with you, that has meaning for you because it has lasted, because of the work that you've done in buying it in the first place and then in taking care of it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Pedro. We will move on to Karen now.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here this morning. I'm one half of the team of the new wedding book, A Guide to Ditching All the Rules. My co-author, Michelle, and I met about 15 years ago working at a fashion magazine and connected as friends and ended up getting married a couple months apart from each other. And we realized that through our experience of getting married, that we weren't alone in this feeling that the wedding industry was pretty out of date and pretty out of touch. So we'd go for a beer after work and we'd chat about wow, I really felt stunned by that. In this notion that there was almost something confessional about it. That in the wedding discourse, you're not allowed to talk about how maybe sexist things might feel, because that's definitely not romantic. But the more people we spoke to, couples in general and women in particular, about their weddings, many felt that they were really sort of taken for a ride or almost let down from what was sold to them as going to be the most spectacular, joyful day of their entire lives. So Michelle and I set out to write the wedding book that we wish had existed when we were planning our weddings, and really set out to challenge the notion that you don't need to be utterly consumed by your wedding. And more importantly, your wedding shouldn't trump your values. So if you're an astute budget planner, you shouldn't have to blow your life savings on a 6-hour party. Or if you really care about sustainability, you shouldn't be spending thousands of dollars on a dress that's functionally made out of plastic. So it was really this notion of challenging the wedding industrial complex, but doing it in a way that felt relatable and fun and authentic, so couples can feel energized and super excited about planning the wedding that they actually want to have, as opposed to planning the wedding that they've been given a script to follow.
Thank you so much, Karen. All right, and last but not least, let's move on over to Jennifer.
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Turliuk and my book is called How to Figure Out What to Do with Your Life Next. It's all about career selection using principles of design thinking, lean methodology, and quantified self. And just some background on it. So I used to be part of the 80% of people that are dissatisfied with their work. According to studies, that's how many people are dissatisfied, which is a huge amount. It's a big problem in society, and it's costing us in terms of health, happiness, and also costing corporations billions of dollars. So I was dissatisfied in a corporate job, but I couldn't figure out what to do next. That wasn't something that had been taught in school. So I actually quit my corporate job, flew to Silicon Valley, and interviewed a whole bunch of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, professors, and investors, and asked them how they figured out what to do with their lives. And I used what I learned from them to help figure out my next step, which ended up becoming an entrepreneur, which I'm much more satisfied in. And I realized that looking back, I developed a bit of a career design process that involves principles like prototyping, shadowing, so that instead of, for example, going to law school without having ever experienced what it's like to be a lawyer and investing like 8 years of your life and then finding out maybe you don't like it, my book shows how you can prototype experiences you might be interested to see if they are actually things that you might like. So it shares the lessons I learned while in Silicon Valley, as well as a number of other principles for finding a career that you'd be satisfied in. And I'm really excited about it. It's always been a dream of mine to have a book with a publisher that ends up in local bookstores, so I'm super jazzed about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. All right. And so as you might have noticed from hearing all three of these individuals speak, is that all of their books center around lifestyle. And lifestyle is quite the hot topic right now, especially the curation of one's lifestyle. So I wanted to ask each of these authors, how does your book fit into the idea of lifestyle curation? We'll start with Pedro.
Well, I guess I would say it's a little contrarian, is that my approach is I try to help people become their own curators. For instance, there's a lot of menswear companies out there who are sending packages to people every month of, pre-selected clothes, and you can try it or send it back or whatever. And I would prefer that the person gets to know themselves and gets to understand their own sense of style well enough that they can do this, that they can make those choices. And that they can identify what is actually going to be, what is worth it, what's worth spending money on. So that's why I'm trying to provide an overall guide, but also there's a lot of personal storytelling in the book, because a lot of this is about just your own growth as an individual. And the reason I don't focus on brands and companies is because that's not an automatic signifier of quality. I want to teach people how to identify quality for themselves. They can build a truly personal wardrobe. And I mean, it's also part of helping people on their own journey of finding their personal style. And in my opinion, that's something that you need to curate for yourself.
Wonderful. All right, let's move to Karen.
It's such a great question. I'd say that weddings and curation really go hand in hand, and you don't have to look much further than social media or Pinterest, for example, to look at how couples are literally curating a vision for how their wedding is going to look. It's something that Michelle and I pick away at, because our lens on it is basically, it's like giving a child whatever shade of blue they want to pick their room. It's already sort of a predetermined list from which you can curate. So couples are given this really narrow lens, and what we're advocating for is to broaden that and sort of crack it wide open. I think this is so crucial for an industry that is essentially invented and propped up by marketing. A lot of the things that couples curate to be as part of their wedding have been sold as something that's traditional, and we pick away at that a lot of these are just actually really modern constructs that fit marketers really well, but they're not traditional at all. They're completely manufactured. And further to that, it's an industry that's really propped up by a lack of diversity and inclusion. So to flip through Bridal magazine, certainly before 2020, you'd be hard pressed to find any imagery of couples that aren't thin, gorgeous, white, cisgender, able-bodied, and heterosexual. And that doesn't look like who we are as a country. So it's something that we really want to pick apart and broaden that lens of where couples are curating their wedding vision from, because you can't be what you can't see. So by broadening that lens, it gives other couples a license to also broaden their thinking.
That's awesome, Karen. Thank you so much. All right. And last but not least, Jennifer, take it away.
Yeah, so I think curation definitely applies to work these days, whereas it used to be that work was sort of a default thing. You know, whether you work or not and what sort of work you do was often prescribed, and there weren't that many choices. Today, there are tons of choices, and many people, especially millennials, are actively choosing what they want to do and designing their career. They're choosing things that make meaning to them, that they're able to have flexibility in some cases, taking on things called portfolio careers, where they're doing multiple careers at once. And yeah, people are just actively choosing what kind of career they want to have and how it fits their lifestyle. So my book, the goal of my book is to help more people find careers that they like, that they're good at, that help the world, and that make money. Because there's so many problems in the world, such as poverty, hunger, education, and so many more, that if over 80% of people are dissatisfied with their work, they can't make as much of an impact on those problems. So it's to be able to help more people make those decisions of figuring out what they're passionate about and how they can make an impact in a way that fits with their lifestyle goals.
Wonderful. All right. Well, you heard it from all of these lovely folks here, but I will give them one more opportunity to say some final remarks about their book and tell you, should I say, how much we love our indie booksellers. Pedro, go ahead.
I guess the last thing I wanted to say is that I wrote this book before the pandemic, and now that it's made, now that it's out, I realize in many ways it's more relevant now, because I think more people are asking the kinds of questions that I'm trying to answer in the book, because people sat for quite some time not being able to buy new things, having to sit with what they have, maybe realizing it's like, I actually don't like this thing, and this thing over here just doesn't last. And so there's a slight a reassessment of people's values. And I think this certainly applies to companies and services in our communities, especially bookstores, because as much as everybody went online at first, and then we realized, well, hold on a second, what impact is this having on my local community, on my local economy? And if we don't support those local folks, the whole thing is going to fall apart. And this is a kind of book that you really need to hold and look through. It's got illustrations and stuff. So the idea that someone can walk into their local bookstore, actually see it, flip through it, and be like, yes, this is the thing that's going to inspire me or inspire someone in my life. That's why I think, incredibly, the timing works out pretty well.
Awesome. All right. And Karen.
Yeah, not dissimilar. We wrote this book pre-pandemic, and we're sort of pleasantly relieved that it still tracks. And I think, if anything, weddings were on this precipice that the pandemic has just pushed them over the edge, that couples are ready for less pomp and more authentic, intimate ceremonies. And I'd say that counterculture that's subverting what's been the big white grand wedding is part of that counterculture that indie bookstores are the backbone of. I appreciate that. The largest bridal magazines in the world are probably not going to have great things to say about this book because it's a direct attack on them. However, this sort of backbone of subculture is where we're finding our real sort of our kindred spirits. And I'd say, not dissimilar on the media front, we're getting a lot of traction with those sort of indie counterculture sites like Refinery 29 that is really heartwarming and really reassuring. So we know that there's an important role for those indie bookstores in bringing this collective together.
Wonderful. And Jennifer?
Yeah, I also wrote the book Pre-Pandemic, and similarly, I'm noticing that a lot of the themes are more applicable than ever. It seems like right now it's the largest reorganization of careers and education that we've ever seen in our lifetimes, which is really exciting and also for a lot of people nerve-wracking, and also presents a lot of opportunities. So it's a way to figure out, wow, given this new reality, how do I want to actively live my life? And work is a huge part of that, upwards of 40 hours a week for a lot of people. So my book helps them figure out how to consciously choose their careers in a way that aligns with their goals and their new goals that have maybe formulated through the pandemic. And in terms of local booksellers, it's like I said, it's been a dream of mine since I was a kid to have a book with a publisher. Bookstores were libraries and bookstores were my sanctuary when I was a kid, and continue to be sort of cathedrals of knowledge. They're amazing, and I'm super excited here. I've already contacted my local bookseller in my neighborhood, as well as in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and encouraging purchasers to purchase directly from the local bookstores to support local and shop local and support the economy and the local booksellers. So happy to do whatever I can to support and promote local bookstores and make a difference on that side where I can.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you all so much for coming and sharing all of this valuable information, both about your books and about yourselves. Once again, that is Pedro Mendes from 10 Garments Every Man Should Own, Karen Cleveland, one half of the new wedding book with Michelle Bilodeau, and Jennifer Turliuk, the author of How to Figure Out What to Do with Your Life Next. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you'll buy our books. Thank you so much.